Thank you all for joining us. I know we've been on hiatus for a few weeks, and we're going to keep this class a little shorter, and then hopefully next week we're going to change the time of the class earlier to a little earlier. So this week is Parsha Ki Savo. We're smack in the middle of the month of Elul. I know it sounds funny because we're still in August this year, but everything's very early this year. And Parsha Ki Savo is a very special parsha. I mean, every parsha is special, but it is officially my bar mitzvah parsha. I know I said Kiseche was the parsha that I learned the Torah, but this is my bar mitzvah parsha, and it has the brachas and the clothes. It has the blessings and the curses. It mentions the blessing and the curses in the end of Shemos in Parshas Loscha. Sorry, the end of Vayikra, and it also mentions it now in the end of Devarim, and we know that the reason why it's organized in this way is it's because before the holiday of Shavuot and before the holiday of Rosh Hashanah. I don't want to get into why it's before the holiday of Shavuot. We spoke about that in the past. I do want to talk a little bit about why it's before the holiday of Rosh Hashanah, and we'll talk about one other point. There's a lot to talk about in this week's parsha, like every parsha, but we'll talk about a few other points, and we'll keep it a short class today. A very practical reason. We know before Rosh Hashanah we get judged, and basically it's sort of giving us the blessing and the curses to sort of keep us in check and to make us realize what's important, what's not important, and sort of to put things in perspective. If you do good, this is what's going to happen. If you don't do good, so this is what's going to happen. And sort of before the Yom Adin, before the Day of Judgment, it's there to sort of to put us back on the right track, and that's the the main reason and the most logical reason of why the blessings and the curses are before Rosh Hashanah. There's another idea that the commentaries along these lines, but it's just sort of taking a little deeper, that the commentaries expand on, that the idea of the blessings and the curses before Rosh Hashanah, right, is also to teach us, and for us to reflect on that this is the time, the month of Elul, right, is really the time of sort of doing our, checking ourselves and doing our year in review. And we spoke about this a little bit. And the blessing and the curses are not there to scare us, right? The first is to scare us. Oh, if you do bad. In Judaism, we're not here to sort of, yes, there's consequences to our actions, but it's not there to sort of serve God in fear. On the contrary, we're supposed to serve God b'simcha, with joy. And actually, one of the things that is brought down, a famous line in the curses, right? It says, "Why did all these curses?" I think this is probably one of the most powerful verses that. It's a powerful verse for us to extrapolate and to learn from, and again to sort of set the stage as we're analyzing ourselves and reflecting on ourselves during this period of time. It says in the middle of the curses, it tells us, why did this happen? Because you didn't serve God. The simcha b'tuv levav, with simcha, with happiness, b'tuv levav, with a gladdened heart. Right? That's why this happened. I'm trying to find the verse right now, right? But it's sort of smack in the middle of the curses, right? That's where it says. Verse on page 1080 in the Art Scroll Chumash, and it's verse 47. Because you didn't serve God you didn't serve God with joy and a gladdened heart. Now it says that's why the curses came. one second, come on, we're doing it just because we're not doing it b'simcha, but we're still serving God, we're still eating kosher, and we're still keeping Shabbos, and we're still wearing our yarmulke, and we're still dressing modest, and we're still putting on our phone, we're still lighting candles, Shabbos candles, and we're doing everything that we're supposed to be doing, right? But no, because we didn't do it b'simcha. So I had a bad day, like, come on, how could you fault me for not having a proper emotion? And the commentaries expand on this and say no, because that's the whole thing. When you care about something and you want to be part of something, so then automatically, even if it's a bad day, you still have joy in it. Simcha doesn't necessarily mean to say joy like the secular word of joy. Oh, I'm happy, and that's not what it means. Simcha is an internal satisfaction, and simcha is an internal happiness, that because you're doing the right thing, even if you have a hard day, but if you're doing the right thing, you're doing the right thing, and you feel satisfied about that. You feel like you're going in the right direction. You feel like automatically it makes you happy, right? Tamid Chachamim Marvin Shalom Ba'olam, the great Torah sages bring peace to the world, right? Is because they're not that, God forbid, not that the UN brings any peace anyways, but they're not peace people. They're not going out and because by them automatically doing, because of their righteousness and what they are doing, they're doing with a gladdened heart and doing it with the right attitude, that spreads. And when people feel content and people feel like they're doing something for the right reason, there's no reason to feel jealous of someone else. There's no reason to want to be like someone else. There's no reason to hurt someone else, because you're happy with what you're doing, right? The whole idea of jealousy comes from not being happy. So that's why it says that the curses come because of a lack of simcha. And that's really what we're supposed to be working on Rosh Hashanah, right? Whatever, of course, we have to be reflecting on doing the mitzvahs and not doing the transgressions. And we know that there's consequences. But really, it's telling us that we also have to be focused on this important idea that we have to do things because that's our mission, and this is what we're supposed to be doing, and therefore bring simcha to our lives. Right? When whatever it is that we're doing, we should feel content and feel good. Not content in a way like, oh, I don't need to do anymore, but content in the sense of that I feel like I have a purpose and I'm happy of doing, not feeling forced to do this. Right? Yira, fear, is not really the best word. It's really should be reverence. Right? That's the word. It's reverence. We have to have reverence of God. Right? Which, of course, is a fear of retribution if we do the wrong thing, but it's more the reverence of the awe of God, that we want to be next to God and serve Him because of our reverence of Him, and that's really the avodah. That's really what we're supposed to be working on, and that's really what the blessings and the curses are supposed to remind us. That when we don't do that, right? So maybe we'll do the mitzvahs for a little while, but eventually we might stop because we don't feel content about it. We don't feel good about it. We don't feel like we're accomplishing, and that's something that we really have to work on. So that's one idea that I want to bring out. Now, I think there's an idea from the beginning of the parsha that really gives us a lesson of how to connect to being able to have that content in the sense of knowing that we have meaning in our lives when we're doing what Hashem tells us to do. So the beginning of this week's parsha speaks about the mitzvah of Bikurim. And then after the mitzvah Bikurim is bringing the first fruit that grows on your tree. You take once the first fruit buds, right? You take a string and you wrap it around it, and then you collect all those and you bring them up to the Beis Hamikdash and you eat them and you bring it to the Beis Hamikdash. It's a whole big. There was trumpets, and the Talmud speaks about when the farmers would bring their weir, right? Their Bikurim. There's a whole celebration. And then after that, it speaks about the mitzvah of tzedakah, what we would call tzedakah, which is a meiser, right? Bringing meiser, what we could refer to nowadays as tzedakah. There's still the mitzvah of meiser, but it's also giving from giving a tenth of what you have to the Kohen or to the poor, right, or to the needy, and then it starts going into starting to talk about the blessings and the curses, and really these two mitzvos of Bikurim and Tzedakah are really the epitome of doing something because you realize that it's important. What's the importance of why taking the first fruit that buds, right? Why not the nicest one, right? If we're an external religion, it wouldn't be the first one. The first one's not always the nicest one that buds. The first one that buds is not always the nicest fruit. It could be a little small, could be not, the most delicious, So you should say, pick your best one, right? Why the first one that buds? And the idea is that when you take the first one that buds, you're taking that internal satisfaction of seeing that your produce is your work that you did is the fruits of your labor is coming to fruition. That all that hard work that the farmer did of sowing and planting and watering and waiting and all there's to be a famine, or it's going to rain too much, or it's going to be a flood, or it's not going to rain the right time, and all bugs and this and all that stuff. Thank God, finally, we see that our work, the work of our labor, the labor of our work is coming into fruition. And you say that, we're thanking God for that. We're going to bring that to God, right? Because we realize that everything, really, our purpose in this world is to have a relationship with Hashem, a relationship with God. Realize that it's really our work, but it's really with the grace of God, Hashem, that everything worked out the way it did, right? Because it could have been a flood, there could have been a drought, it could have been a this, it could have been a that, who knows what, right? And yes, we have to put all that hard work. That's our effort, but it's in the grace of God. And when you start having that philosophy, then the whole life changes. Right? Do you want to have you want to do it with simcha? You feel content. You feel a mission when you're doing mitzvos and not doing averos and not going to your favorite restaurant that used to be, but now it's not kosher, and that's not the place to go, right? And you feel content. You don't feel okay. So I became religious. I can't enjoy myself. No, I have a different kind of enjoyment. I have an enjoyment of connection, of a much deeper one, of not just a physical, physical pleasure that dissipates after a little while. Yes, it was good. Yeah, but 10 minutes later, an hour later, it's gone. Right? So when you have this philosophy, your whole attitude changes, and really, again, the attitude for tzedakah changes. You realize that 10% is an idea of realizing that everything that you own, everything that you have is really a gift from Hashem, and therefore I have to give 10% of my earnings. I have to give 10% of my stocks, or whatever it is, my earnings, to tzedakah. Is an idea to, again, the same idea, is to remind us that everything's from Hashem, right? And really to train us and to make this attitude of that we're in the grace of Hashem, and when we're in the grace of Hashem, when we do what Hashem wants us to do, well, maybe if I give my 10%, I might not be able to afford that. I might be able to do that. That's not our money; it's God's money. God told us to give that money to tzedakah. So there's nothing to reflect on, nothing to worry about. We're doing what Hashem wants us to do, and it's not for us to use that money. It's if you have money that someone lent you, right? Someone gave you money to hold, right, and give it back to them, right? You use that money. Now you have to pay that back. So it's a different word completely, right? So it's sort of a mindset of, again, realizing that everything's from Hashem. And when you realize that, again, then your whole attitude changes. And really, these two mitzvahs before the start of the blessing and the curses really teach us this important lesson, right? Of why the blessings and the curses before Rosh Hashanah, as we mentioned, to mention this verse of B'simcha b'tuv levav, of not serving Hashem with the content, not serving Hashem because of wanting to serve Hashem and connecting to this philosophy and changing our whole mindset. And as long as we're breathing in this world, we have the opportunity to change that mindset, and to move forward in the right way. And that's really, I think, an important lesson to reflect on, to think about as we move forward. So my blessing to all of us is, as we move forward, Mitzvah Hashem, next week we'll have a class, and Rosh Hashanah is just in 2.5 weeks. Right, but Mirza Hashem will be able to reflect on this idea, look at our possessions, look at the world around us, look at our actions, and say, Of course, I want to serve Hashem. Of course, I want to have that relationship with Him. Right? I have no problems with giving my tzedakah. I have no problems with giving my first fruit. Right? This is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is how I connect with Hashem. This is how I ensure that the Jewish people are growing and being part of this great mission. And hopefully, with changing that attitude and connecting to that, we'll have a Shana Tova, a really sweet new year, and a blessed new year. Thank you all for joining us today. Everybody have a great evening.